Hello, and welcome back to our next Bosbec tutorial. In this session, we'll be looking into debugging and troubleshooting a workflow, the tools available, and also look into the concepts of workflow context and workflow execution history, and what they are. As I touched on briefly in the previous video, under View, we have Execution History. This window shows us a list of previously run jobs. The default view is last 24 hours, but there are other predefined options, as well as the ability to manually choose specific dates. The columns are state, how long a process has come or current progress, how many jobs it has executed, when it started to run, which trigger was activated, and if there are still jobs to run. You can even delete columns by right-clicking on them or using the three dots. This job is the one we set up in the previous video. To summarize, this workflow has a mail trigger where a message sent to an incoming address results in an outgoing SMS. If you haven't viewed that video yet, there is a link to it in the description below. I'll send an email now to show you how it appears in the execution window. When a mail message arrives, it shows up as an item being processed. You see here that it arrived a few seconds ago and activated trigger 1. When we click on it, it opens a few new windows that we can use. Here you can see what metadata is available at this stage, what jobs have been executed, and what resources have been used during the workflow. If we look at the workflow, you'll notice green dots next to several of the jobs. These show the path that the workflow followed. If we'd had a workflow that branched off, like this for example, and it had only gone here for some reason, then this job would have a green dot like it does. And this one wouldn't, since it hadn't run. During the workflow process, we have various states. At this state, we have access to a variety of different resources. This is what we call workflow context. In order to demonstrate how this works, I thought we'd insert a debug job here so that we can debug the workflow before it's run each stage. We'll search for debug, set debug mode, open it, click on debug mode, and then we splice it into the workflow. Now when we run this again with a new test message, you'll see that it shows up, only has one job executed, and it's paused. When we click on it, the first job is highlighted, which shows that it was recently run, as noted by the green dot. And we see what the next job is since it's circled. If we look at the job execution stories, we see that job 4 has run, but nothing more. We also see that there is less metadata than earlier, meaning we have less data to work with. If we open the incoming message menu, we see that we've received a message from me to this number and email address that we created in the previous video and what text we sent in. In order to run the next step, we can click the buttons here in the top right-hand corner. We can choose Continue to End, Continue one step, and we have a visual tool for dragging and choosing the next step. But we'll choose one step. Now we see that it's executed one job and found one unit. We can also see this in the job execution stories, where it shows that it started a job and found one unit, and it will update the workflow context group with that newly found unit. It even popped up in available resources, legacy resources within temporary group. If we open it, we can see the information it contains, including this telephone number. But right now we have no idea what the actual message text is within the metadata. We've collected the sender information, but we want to add the message text to the metadata so that we can use it later. That's where job 2 comes in that we set up to collect message body text. So when we run job 2 now, we see it was run noted here as job_2 success equals true. We have a new entry in stories here where it says that it has found test 2 in the message body. And here we see the actual message text, test 2. At this point, we have everything we need to send a message. We have a recipient in the temporary group, since send message to groups is set up to send to workflow context units, and we have the message text. If we run the next job, we see here that it has run the send message to group job. It received a batch and sent to one recipient. We can even confirm that the message was sent by going into Statistics, Message History, and see that a message was sent just a few seconds ago with the sender Bosbec and the text Test 2. In order to illustrate how to problem solve a workflow, I've intentionally broken the one we created earlier. We can see here in the example that an email was received, but that the message that was sent had problems with the text. We need to figure out what happened and why. I'll go back to the workflow and then pull up our execution history. We can see the latest action. Double-click on it. One of the first things we notice in the metadata window is that the line where it says message text and test message. If we look at send message to group within the execution stories, we see that one was sent. So where's the problem? What I did was to rearrange the order of the jobs. Job 2, that is supposed to insert the message text, is actually after the step where the message is sent. In other words, the message text hadn't been inserted before the message was sent. To clarify this, we'll add a debug job like we did earlier. Click on Debug Mode, and we'll send a new test. When we do that, we see that a message was received that triggered the workflow. We click on it. Now we're in the current state. We click forward one step. We check and see that it collects one recipient and adds it to the temporary group as it should. But that's not the problem, since the message was sent as it should be. When we click on the next step, we see that job 3 was run, here in the execution stories. But we even see here in the metadata that when the message was sent, there was no message text inserted, because that doesn't happen until the next step. When we continue to the next step, it gets inserted, but that's too late. So that is a way of problem solving step by step, even a complicated and complex workflow, to identify at which stage it stops working. We know that the order of these jobs is incorrect. We'll disconnect them, reorder them, and then reconnect them in the correct sequence. We'll save the changes and do a new test. We see the new message and activity. This time, we'll just click Continue to End, since we've resolved the issue. Now we see that everything activated in the correct order. We'll reload the message history. Now we see that the message was sent as it should be. These are the basics of how to identify and problem solve, and also how to think when working with the workflow components. Even if the workflow gets larger and has more components, these basics remain the same. Double-check each step to identify where along the process the error is. In our next video, we'll create a workflow for collecting registrations to a newsletter with the help of forms. We'll even look at units and groups. Please visit Bosbec.com to learn more about our company and services. There you can also find additional guides and tutorials, as well as contact alternatives for questions and technical support.